Hi, this is Mike from thesubstream.com, and seeing as Friday marks the release of Paranormal Activity 2, the follow-up to one of the absolute surprise box office smash horror movies of the decade, Paranormal Activity, we thought we would spend some time talking about what's become the go-to genre for modern horror filmmaking, the horror mockumentary. While mockumentaries have been around since the 60s in the form of comedies like A Hard Day's Night, the Beatles film, which is essentially the first one, or Woody Allen's second directed film, the first one that's not What's Up Tiger Lily, which is called Take the Money and Run. It took a long time for horror filmmakers to discover the genre, the mockumentary genre. Ruggero Deodato in 1980 made Cannibal Holocaust, the famously banned across the world, much whispered about possible snuff film that when you were in high school, you knew there was a video store in this other town down the road that had it and you should go see it. But it was basically like 20 years before a little film that most people haven't heard of called The Blair Witch Project. And since then, especially in the past like 5 or 6 years, the horror mockumentary genre has exploded, becoming the basically go-to genre for horror filmmakers. I mean, okay, the go-to genres are still basically zombies and vampires, but you know what I mean. Why are we suddenly inundated by horror mockumentary films like The Poughkeepsie Tapes and Quarantine and Diary of the Dead and Cloverfield? 3 reasons. First, they're really, really, really cheap. Don't want to rent a dolly and tracks and take the time setting it up, and don't want to rent a whole bunch of 20K lights or pay a director of photography or a camera assistant or anything. Just buy a handycam and give it to one of your actors and have them run around in the forest, or have them wear a helmet with a camera strapped to it. It's really cheap to do that. Put a security camera up on the wall in the bedroom of a suburban household and have your suburban horror play out in front of it. That costs basically nothing. The Blair Witch guys turned like 25 grand, which is what they spent on principal photography, into $250 million. Paranormal Activity's grossed like almost $200 million, and it costs less to shoot than IKEA costs to buy. The second reason, you get to do really cool things with POV that you can't do in normal films. When you're making a doc, you're given free rein to involve yourself in the story, and audiences that watch documentaries are used to things happening to the people that are holding the camera. They're used to people talking to people slightly off camera, or looking in the camera, talking to the camera, and they're used to things happening to the people behind or carrying or operating the camera. So when you're making a horror mockumentary film, you can do things like the Spanish directors Joan Balaguerro and Paco Plaza did with their film Wreck and the sequel Wreck 2, and actually have the story happen to like a sexy news reporter and her cameraman. You get to do these crazy cool things with the first person POV. Like in a normal movie, when a zombie's running through the forest or lurching through the forest chasing a person, it happens like this, running across the screen, and the camera tracks them as they go through the forest. But when you have this thing, the chase happening to the person that's actually holding or operating the camera, the zombies or whatever get to go right at the camera, right at you sitting in the audience. It's not just like startling, which it often is, but it happens if it's done really well, that you actually can make this really kind of deeper than normal connection because of the first person POV. And it's really kind of scary when it works, as it does in the 2 Wreck films. The third reason is kind of obvious but subtle, and we still need to talk about it. By borrowing the technique of documentary filmmaking, by making your film look like a documentary, of which your audience has seen many, always assuming that they're basically true, or by actually saying, as the filmmakers behind films like The Blair Witch Project or Cloverfield did, that your film is made up of found footage. So it doesn't just feel real because you're using the trappings of the documentary format for an audience that's used to interpreting those things as being real. You're also going so far a lot of the times as saying that this actually happened. And yes, okay, it actually happened in a way that it ended up being a 90-minute film that you still have to pay $12 to go see, in which people died, which doesn't make much sense. But when you do that equation, that am I buying this enough that I'm going to invest energy paying attention so that I can actually be scared and have some kind of emotional response to these zombies or whatever that's happening, or is it stupid and I'm dismissing it and I'm not getting involved and not getting scared because it's fake and it doesn't exist and Draculas aren't real equation, adding in that little, I found these tapes in the forest, this actually happened bit, can be enough to, swing that in a good direction where you actually buy it and do get scared. Thank you, Mike, for writing the longest sentence of all time. Anyway, enjoy Paranormal Activity 2. Here's hoping it's no Blair Witch Project 2, which sucked!